Imagine you're on a ship, the vast, icy expanse of Antarctica surrounding you. The year is 1914, and you're part of an ambitious expedition led by the legendary explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton. The goal? To be the first to cross the Antarctic continent on foot. You and 27 other men are aboard the majestic ship, the Endurance. A vessel built to withstand the harshest conditions on Earth. Spirits are high, the adventure has just begun, and the world awaits your triumphant return. But the Antarctic is a cruel and unpredictable mistress. What was meant to be a groundbreaking journey quickly turns into one of the most incredible survival stories ever told. This is the true story of the Imperial Transantarctic Expedition. As the Endurance sailed deeper into the Weddell Sea, the ice began to close in. At first, it was a minor inconvenience, a delay. But soon, the ship was completely trapped, a tiny wooden toy in the jaws of a colossal ice pack. For months, the men waited, hoping the ice would release its grip. They passed the time playing football on the ice, singing songs, and maintaining a strict routine to keep morale from sinking. Shackleton, a master of leadership, knew that keeping his men occupied and hopeful was as crucial as any physical supply. But as the southern winter descended, bringing with it perpetual darkness and plummeting temperatures, the immense pressure of the ice began to take its toll on the Endurance. The groans and creaks of the ship's timbers were a constant, terrifying reminder of their precarious situation. Then, the inevitable happened. The ice, with a force of unimaginable power, began to crush the Endurance. The ship's strong oak beams splintered like matchsticks. The sounds were horrifying, like the cries of a dying beast. Shackleton gave the order to abandon ship. The men salvaged what they could, lifeboats, food, and essential supplies, before watching their home for the past years sink beneath the ice. There they were, 28 men, stranded on a floating sheet of ice in the middle of the most hostile environment on the planet, thousands of miles from civilization. Their expedition was over. A new, more desperate one had just begun, the mission to survive. They set up a makeshift camp on the ice, which they grimly named Patience Camp. Life was a brutal routine of hunting seals and penguins for food and fuel, conserving their meager rations, and huddling together for warmth. The psychological toll was immense. The endless white landscape, the biting wind, and the constant uncertainty gnawed at them. Shackleton's leadership was the glue that held them together. He ensured rations were divided equally, settled disputes with fairness, and never, ever showed a hint of despair, even when he must have felt it most. He understood that a single crack in their unity could lead to disaster. They drifted on the ice floe for months, carried by the ocean currents, their fate completely out of their hands. As the Antarctic summer approached, their ice floe began to break apart. The ground beneath their feet was no longer solid. It was time to take to the lifeboats. They had 3 small, open boats, the James Caird, the Dudley Docker, and the Stancomb Wills. The men, and weakened by hunger and cold, embarked on a perilous journey through a sea choked with ice. For 7 harrowing days, they rowed, battling freezing waves, dodging massive icebergs, and suffering from frostbite and seasickness. They were soaked to the bone with no way to get dry. Finally, through sheer grit and determination, they spotted land, the desolate and uninhabited Elephant Island. It was the first time they had stood on solid ground in 497 days. But Elephant Island was not a salvation. It was merely a temporary refuge. It was a remote, rocky outcrop, far from any shipping lanes. No one would ever find them there by chance. Rescue would not come to them, they had to go to it. Shackleton made a decision that seemed impossibly daring, almost suicidal. He would take 5 of his strongest men and attempt to sail one of the lifeboats, the 22-foot James Caird, across 800 miles of the most treacherous ocean on Earth, the Southern Ocean to the whaling stations on South Georgia Island. The remaining 22 men would be left behind on Elephant Island, under the command of his second-in-command, Frank Wild, to wait and pray for his return. The journey of the James Caird is a legend in itself. Shackleton and his 5 companions faced monstrous waves, some as tall as mountains, hurricane-force winds, and freezing spray that coated their boat and clothes in a thick layer of ice. They were constantly bailing water, their hands raw and frozen. They navigated with a sextant, catching fleeting glimpses of the sun between storm clouds. Sleep was a luxury they could not afford, grabbing only moments of rest. Miraculously, after 16 days of this hellish voyage, they spotted the cliffs of South Georgia. But their ordeal was far from over. Storm had pushed them to the uninhabited southern coast of the island. The whaling stations were on the other side, separated by a range of treacherous, uncharted, and glacier-covered mountains. Too weak to risk sailing around the island, Shackleton, along with two of his men, Tom Crean and Frank Worsley, set off on a final, desperate trek. With no proper climbing gear, just screws pushed through their boots for grip, and a carpenter's adze as an ice axe, they began to cross the island's mountainous interior. For 36 continuous hours, they climbed icy peaks and navigated deadly crevasses. Driven by the knowledge that the lives of 22 men depended on them. They were exhausted, hallucinating from lack of sleep, but they pushed onward. At one point, to save time, they coiled a rope and slid down a steep, snowy slope, gambling everything on a single mad rush into the unknown. Finally, they heard a sound they had unheard in nearly 2 years, a steam whistle from one of the whaling stations. They had made it. Staggering into the Stromness whaling station, they were a terrifying sight. Their faces were black from blubber smoke. Their hair was matted and long, and their clothes were in tatters. The station manager didn't recognize them at first. When Shackleton announced who he was, the tough old whalers were moved to tears. But Shackleton couldn't rest. His first words were, "Tell me, when was the war over?" He had been so cut off from the world he did, and even know World War I was still raging. His next thought was of the men he had left behind. Rescuing the men on Elephant Island proved to be another epic challenge. 3 attempts to reach them were thwarted by impenetrable pack ice. The men left on the island were on the brink of starvation, their hope dwindling with each passing day. Frank Wild maintained their discipline and routine, just as Shackleton had taught them, never letting them give up. Finally, on his 4th attempt, aboard a small Chilean steam tug called the Yelcho, Shackleton broke through the ice. As the ship appeared through the fog, the men on the shore could hardly believe their eyes. They scrambled to the beach, cheering and crying with relief. Shackleton stood on the bow, counting them as they came into view. He shouted, "Are you all well?" The reply came back across the water, "All well, boss." Against all odds, after almost 2 years lost in the Antarctic, every single one of the 28 men of the Endurance had survived. The story of Shackleton and the Endurance is more than just a tale of survival. It's a timeless lesson in leadership, endurance, and the unbreakable power of the human spirit. In the face of absolute disaster, when all hope seemed lost, Ernest Shackleton refused to surrender. His unwavering optimism and his total devotion to his crew turned a failed expedition into an epic triumph of humanity. He lost his ship, but he saved every single one of his men, and that is a legacy greater than any geographical discovery. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as incredible as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing tales from history. See you next time.